see what the possible business implications are around this British polling taking place tomorrow. To discuss, we're joined on the line by the CEO of the South African Chamber of Commerce in the UK, David Butler. David, a great pleasure to have you with us. This has been so interesting because Theresa May called for these elections to consolidate the Conservative Party's strong hand, but now it looks like she's lost support. What are you expecting?
I think, good evening. I think that our nerves are pretty frayed here in the UK, and the election's not doing us any favours whatsoever. Democracy has a funny way of jumping up and biting you when you least expect it, and the nerves are a bit frayed at the moment here in the UK. We have seen over the course of the last 50 days a toing and froing of public sentiment and the personal status of the key leadership vying for election tomorrow. So Jeremy Corbyn has seen his personal status improve dramatically. He's been out in front of very large crowds, and I think keep an eye on the Labour Party tomorrow. If the youth come out and vote, he commands very, very strong support in the under 25 category in the UK. Theresa May has demonstrated that maybe she's not quite as strong and as stable as people and the Conservative Party like to believe that she was. She's turned around a couple of times. The Conservatives, in their manifesto, which they launched a couple of weeks ago, made a huge mistake in their statement on social care, the dementia tax, as it's colloquially known here. So everything to play for tomorrow, and I think that the nerves are certainly getting twitchy.
Whatever happens, say Corbyn comes in, he was once pushing for the Brexit, so it wouldn't necessarily change the course that the UK is on to leave the EU, or could it in any way?
Well, I think I'm a Remainer, and a lot of the members of the Chamber businesses who've got a sense of how the economy's shifting will say that they also would have voted to remain. But I think that the sentiment here now is that we're on course. We are likely to leave the EU, very likely to leave the EU in the next couple of years. The main difference in policy between the Conservatives and the Labour Party is that Mrs May, to appease her pro-Brexiteer right of the party, has basically said that no deal is better than a bad deal, and is likely to walk away or has threatened to walk away if some of the key terms that she wants are the negotiations don't go well for. Whereas Labour and Mr Corbyn have been very, very clear in that, yes, we are heading to leave the European Union. However, there will be a deal, and no deal is the worst deal. And I think from an economics perspective and from a business perspective, we tend to agree with Mr Corbyn's sentiments. Most economists will agree that a situation where we leave the European Union without a deal is the worst of all worlds. So expect some very tough backwards and forwards in the negotiations, but eventually pragmatism, we hope, will rule the roost, and we'll find that a deal will be struck. From a politics perspective, of course, the European Union are set on a course where the UK isn't going to be in a better position with vis-a-vis membership of the European Union in the deal that it's likely to strike, because politically that would be unmanageable by the European Union, which is the key the key element the European Union is looking to is to remain a force, remain stable, and not start to fray at the edges, which we've been seeing. So it's going to be a challenging couple of years economically and politically. Very tough negotiations, but I think, to answer your question, regardless of whether Labour or the Conservatives win tomorrow, we are on course to leave the European Union. The only fly in that ointment, of course, is the Liberal Democrats, who have said that if they form a significant part of a government, then they will push extremely hard for a second referendum once the terms of the deal becomes clear, and they will be campaigning for an option for us to remain within the EU.
David, market-wise, there seems to be a few nerves, not as many as expected, because you will recall the fallout after that Brexit vote count was done, and there was such fluctuations. The rand went wild, even worse than after our finance minister had been removed. So I guess what I'm asking is, could we see any major volatility tomorrow, or is the market prepared for May, but possibly even Corbyn, because we have seen those polls change over time?
I think the market's become quite cynical about trying to read the polls, as have the politicians and as have the media. So no one really knows which way it's going to go tomorrow. There are a number of possible options. So we could have a hung parliament, which would be a disaster, and you would definitely see quite significant market reaction to that negatively. We could have Theresa May with a very large majority, and I think if that's the case, we'll see a positive shift in the market, because if she wins a large majority, then we're likely to see a negotiation and a situation where she will take a softer stance and the deal will be done. I think talk of there being no deal will drift away, because she would have a majority large enough to counter the far right of a party, which she needs to manage, the strident Brexiteers who want to leave without a deal. If Conservatives win with a very small majority, say 15 or 20, then you might see some fairly negative market sentiment coming in over later tomorrow, over the weekend, because that puts a lot of pressure and a lot of political pressure on Theresa May to be able to manage the far right of her party, and she will have to try and call on support from Labour and the other parties. And that's going to be politically a very, very difficult position to be in, going into these very, very difficult negotiations with the EU. So the market's hoping for a strong Conservative majority, and I think that the indications are that it is likely that the Conservatives are going to win tomorrow. It is likely that they're going to win with a reasonable majority, but no one's counting their chickens.
David, finally, we're running out of time, but this is so interesting. I guess, what are the implications, if any, for South Africa, despite some possible volatility? Our trade minister has been saying, we can get in there and get some deals once the Brexit happens. We're realizing that's a long way off. But does this mean anything for us?
Well, I think it's, it's positive in that, the UK government is fully looking to strike bilateral trade deals with its Commonwealth partners, and South Africa figures as probably the key partner in Africa. So there's a real appetite to start striking bilateral deals as quickly as they're able to do, and there's a lot of positive sentiment towards that. I think that's one of the positives that people are, they're relishing the idea of being able to try and strike good free trade deals with partnerships outside of the EU structure. Whether that's practically likely to happen will all depend on the negotiation. 2 years is an extremely short time scale to negotiate leaving the EU and a trade deal. So it's probably likely that the compromise will be a transitional period, which will make it quite difficult to strike. But the sentiment will be there, and people will be working to make deals. So from a South African perspective, it's actually not too bad. It's a good opportunity to look at. The only problem, of course, is that there's a limited capacity within government from a trade negotiation perspective to do all of what it needs to do. So top priority will be the US and probably India and China and a couple of the other bigger potential partners. And so when you look at the size South Africa is with the UK, but then you've got to balance that with the fact that there is a very good trade link between South Africa and the UK. A lot of business is done already. There are good South African companies here in the UK, good UK, British companies in South Africa. So, and the teams at the sort of institutional level, the DIT and the DTI are excellent. So, there is a will there, there's a capacity there to make it happen. So we probably see something happen very quickly. So there are some South African companies that are looking forward to the opportunity to get really good preferential trade deals with the UK.
All right. David Butler, let's leave it there on a positive note. And thank you for that great analysis illuminating UK politics for us ahead of the polls tomorrow. David Butler, the CEO of the South African Chamber of Commerce in the UK.